Hello and welcome to another Richard Vobes video monologue. I'm in the studio today. Yesterday, it's a Sunday by the way, it's a Sunday morning and it's wet, miserable and horrible, and the clouds up above have yet again are covered by the geoengineering that is the state. I think it's worth pointing out every time this happens, which is probably pretty much every single day at the moment, so that eventually people do get the idea. It doesn't matter how many times you tell them, look up that, see what's going on, they just go, it's just clouds, isn't it? Anyway, yesterday I decided to do an experiment. That is an experiment for me, not for anybody else, and that was to have a no email day. I decided I was just not going to go on the machine at all on the old computer. Save the eyes, save the screens, and have a day away from all of that. And I did, and it was very successful. But if you've emailed me and you haven't heard back, that'll be what it was. And instead, I was just doing a lot of household chores. I didn't have any interviews to do. I did make some content and stuff and put that up, of course, but I didn't have to have any interviews to sit behind the screen and talk to people, which is, what I do, and it was very nice. So it was nice to have a bit of a day off. I stacked some logs which had arrived. I did some baking. I did some reading. I did a bit of cleaning, all those sort of things, and basically had a bit of a day off. What would have been nice if it hadn't been raining and been miserable was to take a walk up over the South Downs, close to where I live. But it was a bit grim. Anyway, I did get some things in the post, and I wanted to acknowledge that on the show. So I wanted to thank Bob P. for sending him this book to me. Bob P., thanks for sending it to me, and it's called For You. And I think it's a self-published book, but it seems very good. And I thought I'd just read to you the opening. It's only a couple of pages because it's very interesting. Everybody is doing, in some way, it seems to me, their little bit to either wake people up or push back against the nonsense. And I think that is very important. So this is his book, from Bob P. For You. And it says in here, let me just read this to you and see what you make of it. It says here, before a revolution, there is realization and revelation. People become weary, tired of lies, deceit, and manipulation. One group of men and women claim to have power over another group of men and women. They plot and scheme behind closed doors. They deceive with words, both written and spoken. Greed is their driving force behind the current mess we're in. Greed, the intense and selfish desire for something, especially wealth and power, which has corrupted everything from our birth through to our death. What should be and could be a fantastic experience has been corrupted by the greed of a small number of people intent on enriching their time here at the expense of other souls. Most of us have had enough, and instead of being told who the enemy is, we have figured it out for ourselves, and we are doing something about it. It's been necessary to write an account of some recent events, not only to record the happenings, but also to educate people in readiness for the moment when they finally say, enough is enough. They have got progressively worse. After the first pandemic in 2020, the manipulation of the people continued aggressively. The first pandemic required a multi-million-pound advertising campaign to make it real. The subsequent variants of the virus that were released got weaker and weaker, but the restrictions and our removal of our rights continued. Sometimes they let up a bit, dropping some rules, only to bring them back tenfold with the emergence of the flu season. The people getting jabbed are spreading the viruses. The restrictions placed on the unvaccinated are almost intolerable. We are viewed as second-class citizens, not just by the authorities, but by friends and family due to the constant bombardment of propaganda. Our movements are constantly monitored with phone tracking. This is to promote the carbon footprint zones. The excuses for stopping and fining innocent people are being increased by the day. The policy enforcement officers use not only the vaccine cards as an excuse to stop you, but now your phone tracking details can be checked, and this opens up you for business. Any and all electronic communication is monitored. The main social platforms are censored, and anyone posting the truth is blocked and their accounts deleted. Communication by phone is foolish as everything is recorded. There are curfews in place for most of us, and more restrictions are being imposed every day. People are being prevented from working, and healthy people are viewed with suspicion. The farmers have been scared into producing less food, and the floods caused by the weather manipulation have seriously harmed the food production still further. Food shortage is the next crisis they're creating, along with the threat of war in Europe. Power cuts, which haven't happened since the 70s, are now commonplace, not because of breakdowns or staff shortages, but because of the restrictions, fear, and discomfort that they can create. A scared population is easier to control. I've decided to write this account of what is happening in the hope that it will be used to educate future generations to bring to the perpetrators of this Holocaust to justice. The vaccinated are dying, and despite their efforts by the media to distract people from the truth and the constant censorship of the facts, the reality is that once healthy people are now becoming ill, and company policy is to harass anyone without vaccine status. If you survive the vaccine, then you are charged for your carbon footprint. Some of us are fighting back. Good people are having to be violent to protect their friends and family, but we are trying to fight back not with violence, but with knowledge. And it is one man's account of the recent times and what went through to it. So I'm very interested to read that. Thank you, Bob P. It is available from online. It's printed by Amazon, so I imagine it's only available there. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested. But thank you for sending that. People do send in books. I've got another book which I shall show you in a second. But also, of course, people are sending in emails all the time, and sometimes it's quite nice to share those emails with thoughts. We were talking to a lady, Caroline Savage, the other day about gold and silver, and I had this email come in. Good morning, Richard, he says. This is from Roy. It was a thought I had, he says, recalling a time when I started working after leaving school, and it was common practice for people to be paid in cash. By the mid-70s, most employers had moved to bank payments. I just thought, how would employers move back to paying cash with banks having so much control on the withdrawal of cash? Kind regards. So Roy had suggested to me previously to that email, he said, I wonder if employers would consider paying in cash like they used to do. Do you remember, were you somebody who used to line up and get the, through the little window? Yes, what would you like? I'd like my wages, please. Yes, what's your name? Fred Jones. Fred Jones, there you are. Little pay packet, little brown envelope, and inside was cash. Do you know, I think that would be quite useful if you're an employee these days to be paid in cash. I suggested that possibly, what about gold or silver, which is a real asset, rather than a fiat currency that's run by a private corporation called the Bank of England that actually has nothing to do with England and isn't really a bank as such. Has nothing to do with the government anyway, nothing to do with us, the people. It's not our money, in fact. But to be paid in some form of cash, even if it is fiat currency, at least it's yours. At that point, you haven't got to sort of plead with the bank to get it out, as you do these days, where you go to the bank and say, I'd like to take some money out of the bank, please, in cash. What are you going to do with that? You sure it's not a scam? No, it's my money, thank you very much. I earned it. But you deposited it here. You deposed it. You effectively gave it to us. And although we are obliged to give it to you back, we don't have to give it to you back if we think that it is going to be used for wrong purposes, such as scammers, to pay scammers and things like that. They're very reluctant, aren't they? We know that, I think it's NatWest, isn't it, that will only allow you £250 of cash at any one time or ever. I'm not quite sure. Or you can't even put in. They are trying to eradicate cash because they want to get us onto these rather nasty CBDC, central bank digital currency, the controlled currency, which is going to control your life and give you permission what you can spend. It is the slavery currency. Well, we don't want any of that. So Roy is wondering whether businesses could do that, and maybe I would like to see something like silver and gold being used. Little pieces of silver, pieces of eight would be quite good, so that you actually have the asset. I wonder if things are going to change in due time. I think we are going to see big revelations. We're going to see the revolution. We're going to see the end of the nonsense that we've been in. That I do firmly believe. So it'd be interesting, wouldn't it? um, because it's very difficult if you are buying stuff and you can constantly have to go to your bank and they're taking interest and they're making the money out of thin air, and it feels wrong to the very core. Another book that came in that somebody sent to me is called Your Life After Death. Thank you very much to the people who sent that in. I have read some of it. I do try to read some of these things. I get very busy, what with the interviews and various things, but I do try to read the stuff that people send in. And this is really an account. It seems to be an old spirit is talking through somebody, being channeled. A spirit called Joseph, who is talking to a chap I think called Michael, if I remember rightly, with a bunch of friends around who are asking questions about what life is like after death. And it seems from the bits that I've read that there are various realms that you go in. In other words, I think in many ways what it's trying to convey, and it seems to do so very well, is there's nothing to be fearful of death, and that this realm is a realm in which, of course, the earthly realm, the 3D realm, is a realm in which we are learning so much, and that we are on a journey. And I don't know whether the journey starts here, and maybe we've come from somewhere else to come here, and then we go somewhere else on this journey. It doesn't just finish in the way that, say, Richard Dawkins thinks it just finishes like that's it and there's nothing else, with the old Darwin theory of evolution, which, of course, I think most people now are beginning to realise is a load of old nonsense. It's been a corrupted piece of history in order to keep us down, in order to allow the fittest win all the time. And instead of saying, actually, people help one another, and that's how things evolve. Animals help each other. But anyway, let's not get into that. So thank you very much for sending that. That's very interesting. And of course, without the perpetrators of the dark forces, and without the sky being painted, without the water being poisoned, without the money being an illusion, all of these things, this world, this earthly world that we're in at the moment, could be and should be such a beautiful and amazing place. And I mentioned this in my video yesterday, in which I was talking about the spiritual war and how much that we are often misguided into thinking that what we see is it and everything, and yet we are most likely, depending on your point of view, of course, and I do believe this myself, a soul inside a body. And if only we could conquer some of the problems that we have on this world, we could have such an amazing experience. And I think that you do have to a certain extent, withdraw. And that's what I was doing yesterday with my no email day, no computers, none of that. Try to avoid all of those things and stay offline just for a day to reset oneself, and I think that's important. And I'd be interested if you do that from time to time, a sort of reset, not the great reset, by the way, in which we're all going to be turned into transhumanistic people, none of that crap, not talking about that, just days when you get out into nature or do things where you're not worried and you're allowed your own mind to do itself. Anyway, there we go. I just want to acknowledge those people who'd sent in some books, and all of that, and of course your emails as well. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great Sunday if you're watching on the day it goes out. Until next time, goodbye.